Hi everyone, Wolfsbane by Guy Haley, a no spoiler book review. This is book 49 in the Horus Heresy series, and that's not even counting Siege of Terra, obviously, as that comes after. So, I'm going to read out the book synopsis, because I think it's quite useful for these. So the time has come for Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, to fulfill his vow and attempt to stop War Master Horus before he breaks through to the Segmentum Solar. In the face of opposition from 3 of his brother Primarchs, Russ withdraws the Space Wolves Legion from Terra and makes all haste for Horus's position. Reports from Malkador the Sigillite's agents suggest that Horus is utterly changed and infused with a diabolical power so great that no man can stand against him. A warrior of Fenris would never willingly abandon his oaths, but with Horus beyond the touch of mortal blades, the Lord of Winter and War may have doomed himself for the sake of honour. So welcome to my no spoiler review. As you probably know, it's obviously set in the world of Warhammer 40,000, but 10,000 years earlier during the Horus Heresy. I'm a bit behind on the Horus Heresy, but I have all the remaining books I need to catch up on, so obviously depending on my reading of other books, I will get there, hopefully. They really publish them pretty rapidly. So this one follows the Space Wolves who've escaped ambush at Alaxes, and now they make their way back to Terra. But Space Wolves, being the hounds of the Emperor that they are, they're keen to find the throat of the traitor War Master. And so we join them as they abandon the Imperial defence to confront the former Lunar Wolves. The book also follows Belisarius Cawl, an adept at this time of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and if you know your 40k lore, obviously he becomes a lot more important later on. But he kind of gets caught up in this battle here, and the proximity of the traitor legions to the gates of Terra, as I imagine many of the loyalists were at this point. So the kind of story, plot, and pacing, I do think this book has quite a predictable and slow start. There's been so many Horus Heresy books that you kind of get a sense for whether it's going to be a good book or not quite early on, I feel. But I think my instincts, unlike the Space Wolves, actually deserted me on this one, as I think the book really improved over the course of its reading. I do think the plot is quite predictable. It doesn't really throw any surprises in there, really. But I think it was really salvaged by the exciting writing towards the end of the book. When the story came to its conclusion, things really ramped up. And despite, to be honest, not really any big twists or turns, it was an exciting read towards the end. Some of the parts focusing on Adeptus Mechanicus started a bit slow, in my opinion. And I did sometimes find myself losing interest in these sections near the start. Obviously, fans of Adeptus Mechanicus might enjoy them more, since they feature Belisarius Cawl, who's quite a central figure later on in Warhammer, but I did feel like his part of the story could be removed, and it didn't really affect the main point of the book. There's kind of a question here: why not make him more integral to the plot in this book, in particular? It kind of felt like he was sort of shoehorned in, and they just needed to put him in the Horus Heresy because of, without spoilers, his kind of role in later Warhammer. But I kind of think there's a bit of a question mark there about why he wasn't more important to this story. I would have preferred to have seen that. So the setting, imagery, and action. The setting is what you expect. If you've been reading a lot of Horus Heresy, you know what you're going to get. It evokes the grim darkness of the 31st millennium. But I did enjoy the particular kind of planets where the engagements took place. Some of the descriptions of Fenris were really vivid and enjoyable. There's obviously the allusions to Norse mythology that are done well, I thought, without breaking the kind of science fiction immersion. It gets good points for atmosphere. I do think the Space Wolves have their own feel. They're definitely not to everyone's taste, but because they kind of have a bit of like a jovial vibe to them. But it was conveyed very well, their kind of sense of being. And the descriptions of the places where they went, the planets and that, are very evocative, so I enjoyed that. I think Guy Haley writes the action and imagery well. I think the fights are interesting, they're dynamic, and they keep you engaged. But the book did seem to be lacking some of this early on. It had that kind of meandering, and if you see my video on Sigismund, I actually mentioned that, where some of these Horus Heresy books, I don't think this needed to be as long as it is. It has a kind of slow start, but then it gets into the plot and the action, and that kind of made the book better. So although it's predictable and not the best paced, that kind of later section saved it a bit, I think. Characters and development. So I think Guy Haley sometimes is a bit guilty of trying to make certain things a bit too obvious. We keep getting told the characters are arrogant, and characters confirming that. You know, I think there was one point where someone actually says, "Oh, you're so arrogant." It might have been Leman Russ. And then the other characters kind of confirming it, but it's like, we don't need it explicitly stated like that. Just demonstrate it through their interactions. And I think some of the interactions between Hester Aspersia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Cool, they kind of felt a bit belabored and slightly one-dimensional. You know, you see this happen in a lot of books where there's two characters that don't like each other, and that's about as deep as it goes. There could be more exploration there. Belisarius Cool was shown as a lot more human than he is depicted 10,000 years later. Makes sense, as he's a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and you know, they want to get closer to the machine god. And his interactions within the cowardly and hesitant Friedrich are much more interesting than the ones with Aspersia, I felt. I do feel that Guy Haley captured that Norse Viking feel of the Space Wolves well in their personalities and their competitive camaraderie. And by contrast, depicts the Sons of Horus, who obviously pop up in this. You know, they're depicted well, despite their fall to darkness. They don't come across as too linear as the bad guys. And I think that's kind of the danger in writing the Sons of Horus. You know, they've had this kind of gradual fall. And I think some of the Horus Heresy books, especially the early ones, were very successful at that, actually. You know, they're not just token bad guy, inverted commas. Readability. So, as with most Horus Heresy books and Warhammer books, there's a lot of terms that you might not know if you're new to the universe. But disregarding that, if you're a fan, you're not going to find the language complex for the most part. But I did pick up on a couple words that I didn't know, and you know, I read a lot, so it's quite rare for that to happen. So readability is probably not the most readable, but it's nothing too crazy. Originality and whether it's worth your time. So, you know, this is book 49 in a series that's over 52 books, and obviously even more than that if you count Siege of Terra and all the novellas. So we've got to focus more on whether it's worth your while to read, because you're probably not starting at Wolfsbane, I doubt. Obviously, for huge fans of Warhammer and the Horus Heresy, it's worth picking up. It's not a huge surprise, that. And for fans of Space Wolves, this is probably one of the ones to get. And what I usually recommend is that if you haven't read any Horus Heresy and you're coming to Warhammer fresh, probably pick up the ones where they feature your Legion heavily, and then there's a few more that are worth getting, even if they don't feature your Legion. There's probably about under 6 or 7 books, I would say. I might do a video on that. It's probably worth a discussion. But this book, you know, it really only focuses on arguably one key event, really. And then you have this section, you have the kind of inclusion of Belisarius Cool. But it does fit well into the later arc of what's happening in the overall Horus Heresy story. Horus is getting really close to Terra now, at the point of this book. And, you know, it's discussed about where he'll attack. I won't say any more. So it's probably a nice one to include, but not necessarily essential. So final score. It's a solid entry to the Horus Heresy series, not going to blow anyone's mind away, but very much readable after the kind of initial slow start. I think Cool sections could have been better involved with the rest of the plot of the story, and to be honest, been a bit more exciting. But I did like Friedrich, how he kind of played off against Cool. And I enjoyed the writing of the Space Wolves, and their progression for the most part. They're probably one of the most polarising Space Marine legions, though. I think this one just escapes a 6 out of 10. But I enjoyed the ending enough. It kind of left me with a fairly positive impression. So I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. So thanks for listening. Plenty more Horus Heresy coming up, especially Siege of Terra, as I'm now on to those. So please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.